The village of Emara was a quiet place, surrounded by rolling hills and endless savannas. The people lived simple, peaceful lives, following the rhythms of the land and the wisdom of their ancestors. Among them was a young girl named Nia, who was unlike the others. Where most children in the village were content with their daily chores and studies, Nia was filled with a restless spirit, always seeking something more than the routine life around her. At just 14 years old, Nia had already earned a reputation as the curious one, constantly asking questions and wandering off on her own. Her parents, Juma and Amoni, loved her dearly but often worried about her rebellious nature. They tried to guide her, to teach her the importance of patience and discipline, but Nia's mind was always elsewhere. Nia, her father, Juma, would often say, "You must learn to focus on your future. There are things in life that cannot be rushed, especially love. You are too young to understand the ways of men." Her mother, Amoni, would nod in agreement. "Your time will come, child. But for now, your focus should be on learning and growing strong. The world can be unforgiving if you are not prepared." But Nia, with her bright eyes and adventurous heart, found it hard to listen. She often slipped away from her duties, drawn to the secrets of the world around her. Her curiosity was like a flame that could not be extinguished. And it was this curiosity that led her to Kofi, a boy from a neighboring village. Kofi was older than Nia, charming and full of life. He was a skilled hunter, admired by many for his strength and bravery. Nia found herself enchanted by him, sneaking away to meet him in secret at the baobab tree on the outskirts of the village. It became their meeting place, hidden from the eyes of her family and the villagers. Despite the warnings from her parents and the quiet whispers of the elders about the dangers of love at such a young age, Nia could not resist. The thrill of being with Kofi, of sharing stolen moments under the stars, was too much to give up. She convinced herself that what she felt was real, that it was love. And so, the secret meetings continued. But as the days turned into weeks, Nia began to sense the weight of her actions. Deep inside, she knew that the path she was walking was dangerous, but her heart refused to listen to the voice of reason. She was young, and the world was vast and exciting. What harm could come from a little adventure? Nia's restless spirit would soon lead her into a situation far more serious than she could have ever imagined. The baobab tree stood tall and ancient at the edge of Emora, its twisted branches reaching toward the sky like a giant hand. It had witnessed generations of village life, but now it bore silent witness to Nia's secret meetings with Kofi. It became their place, a hidden sanctuary where they could escape from the watchful eyes of the village. Nia would make excuses to leave the house, telling her parents she was going to visit a friend or help with an errand. In reality, she was running to meet Kofi, her heart racing with excitement. He was waiting for her, always with that same confident smile. His presence made her feel alive in a way she had never experienced before. "You're late," Kofi teased one evening as Nia hurried through the tall grass to meet him. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the savannah. "I had to be careful," Nia replied, slightly out of breath. "My father is starting to get suspicious." Kofi laughed and took her hand, pulling her down to sit with him under the tree. "You worry too much, Nia. No one will find us here." The two of them sat in the fading light, talking and laughing as if they were the only people in the world. Kofi's stories of his hunting trips and adventures fascinated Nia, and she found herself hanging on his every word. He was so different from anyone she knew, bold and fearless, and he made her feel special. As the days passed, their meetings became more frequent. Nia looked forward to those moments under the baobab tree, where she could be free from the expectations of her parents and the constraints of village life. She was caught up in the thrill of the secret, the rush of doing something forbidden. But there were moments, late at night when she lay in bed, that the weight of her actions began to press down on her. Her father's words echoed in her mind, "You are too young to understand the word of men." And she couldn't help but wonder if he was right. Was she playing with fire, allowing herself to be swept up in something she didn't fully understand? Kofi, however, never seemed to worry. He was carefree, always brushing aside Nia's concerns. "We are just having fun," he would say, his smile reassuring. "There's no harm in that." And for a while, Nia believed him. She convinced herself that everything was fine, that this secret life of hers could go on without consequence. After all, wasn't she allowed to have a little excitement? Wasn't she allowed to follow her heart, even if it went against the rules? But as the months went by, Nia began to notice changes in herself. Small things at first, a tiredness that wouldn't go away, a constant feeling of unease. She tried to ignore it, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. Little did she know, the consequences of her actions were already unfolding, and soon, her secret would become impossible to hide. One afternoon, as Nia returned home from yet another secret meeting with Kofi, she was called to sit with the village elders. The elders were respected in Imora, known for their wisdom and their deep connection to the traditions of the land. Whenever there was a problem or concern in the village, it was the elders who were consulted for guidance. Nia's father, Jimo, had noticed her increasingly strange behavior. She had been more distracted than usual, often sneaking off and returning late. He feared that his daughter was straying from the path they had laid out for her. And so, he had sought the advice of the elders, hoping they could help guide Nia back before it was too late. As Nia sat before the circle of elders, she felt a pang of guilt. Their eyes, sharp and discerning, seemed to see right through her. She had always respected the elders, but today, their presence made her uncomfortable. "Nia," began Elder Tefari, the oldest and most respected among them, "your father tells us that you have been distant, distracted. He fears that you are being led astray." Nia swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. She had not expected this. "Do you know the story of the girl who disobeyed her elders and brought misfortune upon herself?" Tefari continued, his voice calm but firm. Nia shook her head. She had heard many of the village's folktales but had never been told this one. Elder Tefari leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Nia's. "There was once a girl, not much older than you, who thought she knew better than her parents. She was drawn to a boy, much like you are now, and she ignored all the warnings given to her. She thought she could control her fate." The other elders nodded solemnly as Tefari spoke. But the boy, Tefari continued, did not have the girl's best interest at heart. He led her into a world of deceit, and when she was in her most vulnerable moment, he abandoned her. The girl's family was disgraced, and she was left to bear the burden of her choices alone. It is said that her spirit still wanders the savannah, searching for the love she lost. Nia felt a chill run down her spine. The story, though old, resonated with her in a way she could not ignore. Was this the path she was walking? Would she end up like the girl in the tale? "Your family loves you, Nia," Elder Tefari said gently. "Do not let your curiosity and your heart lead you down a road from which you cannot return." Nia nodded, but inside, she was conflicted. The elder's words were wise, but the pull of her feelings for Kofi was still strong. Could she really walk away from the only thing that made her feel alive? As Nia left the gathering, her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "Remember what the elder said," he whispered. "They speak from experience. Do not make the same mistake." Nia nodded again, but the voice of reason was still battling with the fire in her heart. The warnings had been given, but would she listen? Despite the warnings from the elders and her father's concern, Nia continued to meet Kofi in secret. The thrill of their stolen moments was too intoxicating for her to give up. She convinced herself that she could balance both worlds, her life in the village and her relationship with Kofi. But soon, the first signs of trouble began to emerge. It started with a strange exhaustion that Nia couldn't shake. At first, she thought it was simply from all the sneaking around and late nights under the baobab tree. But as the days passed, the tiredness grew heavier, like a weight pressing down on her. Her legs felt weak, and her body seemed slower than usual. Even her tasks around the house felt like a burden, something she had never experienced before. Her mother, Amoni, noticed the change. "Are you feeling alright, Nia?" she asked one morning as Nia sluggishly helped with breakfast. "I'm fine, Mama," Nia replied, forcing a smile. "I'm just a little tired." Amoni watched her daughter closely, concern growing in her eyes. "You've been tired a lot lately. Maybe you should rest today. I'll take care of the chores." Nia nodded gratefully, though inside, she felt a gnawing worry that she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just the tiredness. She had also been feeling nauseous in the mornings, something that she had been able to hide so far, but it was getting harder to ignore. She pushed the thought away, telling herself it was nothing serious. After all, she was young and strong. Whatever this was, it would pass. But the symptoms didn't pass. They worsened. Weeks went by, and Nia found herself feeling sick more often. She tried to hide it from her parents, but they began to notice her growing discomfort. Her appetite changed, and her energy waned. And then, one evening, after a particularly long day, Nia collapsed in the middle of the house, clutching her stomach in pain. Her parents rushed to her side, alarmed. "Nia!" Juma shouted, lifting her up and carrying her to her bed. "What's wrong? What's happening?" Nia couldn't answer. The pain was overwhelming, and fear gripped her heart. She had never felt anything like this before. Her mind raced as she lay in bed, the realization of what might be happening creeping in like a dark shadow. Could it be? Her mother knelt beside her, placing a cool cloth on Nia's forehead. "It's all right, Nia. We're here. Just rest." But rest was the last thing on Nia's mind. Her thoughts spiraled into panic. She had been so careful, so certain that nothing could happen. And yet, the signs were all there, unmistakable now. Later that night, when her parents had gone to sleep, Nia lay awake, her heart pounding. She pressed a hand to her stomach, the fear finally breaking through her denial. "I can't be," she whispered to herself. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was pregnant. The morning after her collapse, Nia woke up with a sense of dread that hung over her like a storm cloud. Her body felt different now, and the truth she had been avoiding for so long was finally undeniable. She was carrying Kofi's child. Her heart pounded in her chest as she sat up in bed, looking around the small room that had been her sanctuary for as long as she could remember. Everything felt strange and distant now, as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. Nia's mind raced, overwhelmed with questions. How could this have happened? How had she allowed herself to get to this point? She had always thought she could control everything, her life, her feelings, her secret meetings with Kofi. But now, it was all unraveling. She thought of Kofi, of the way he always brushed off her concerns with a smile. He had never been worried, never thought about the consequences of their actions. But now, those consequences were staring her in the face, and she had no idea what to do. "I have to tell him," Nia whispered to herself. "He needs to know." With a deep breath, Nia forced herself out of bed. Her legs felt weak beneath her, but she pushed forward, determined to confront Kofi. She needed to know how he would react, what he would do. Surely, he would understand. He had to. Sneaking out of the house, Nia made her way to the baobab tree, where Kofi had promised to meet her that evening. Her heart raced with every step, fear and hope battling within her. Would he accept the news? Would he help her? Or would he leave her to face this alone? When she arrived at the tree, Kofi was already there, leaning against the trunk with that same carefree smile. "There you are," he called out as she approached. "I was starting to think you weren't coming." Nia tried to smile, but the weight of her news pressed down on her. She stood before him, her hands trembling. "Kofi, we need to talk." Kofi's smile faltered slightly. "What's wrong? You look pale." Nia took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her ears. I think I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. For a moment, Kofi just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, his smile faded completely. "What?" he whispered, taking a step back. Nia's voice trembled. "I'm pregnant, Kofi. I've been feeling sick for weeks, and I'm sure of it now." Kofi shook his head, panic flashing in his eyes. No, that's impossible. It can't be mine. You must be mistaken." Nia felt her heart drop. "But you're the only one I've been with," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "It has to be yours." Kofi took another step back, his face hardening. "I don't care. I'm not ready for this. I can't deal with a baby right now." "You can't tell anyone it's mine, Nia." Nia's world shattered around her as Kofi turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone beneath the baobab tree, her heart broken and her future uncertain. Nia stood frozen under the baobab tree, her mind reeling from Kofi's cold rejection. She had thought he would be different, that he would stand by her in this time of need. But his words echoed in her ears, "Don't tell anyone it's mine." The night seemed to close in around her as she watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the distance. For a long moment, Nia couldn't move, couldn't think. She had never felt so alone, so betrayed. Tears filled her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, refusing to let herself break down. She had to be strong. Somehow, she had to find a way through this, even if Kofi had abandoned her. Slowly, Nia turned and made her way back to the village. Her legs felt heavy, her heart even heavier. She tried to think of a solution, but every thought led back to the same impossible conclusion: she was on her own now. When Nia returned home, she slipped quietly into the house, careful not to wake her parents. She couldn't face them yet. Not with this secret weighing on her. As she lay in bed, staring up at the thatched roof, the reality of her situation pressed down on her like a suffocating weight. She was pregnant, and Kofi had left her to deal with it alone. For the next few days, Nia went through the motions of her daily life, but inside, she was unraveling. She wore looser clothes to hide her growing belly and avoided her parents as much as she could. Every time she saw her mother's loving gaze or heard her father's proud words, the guilt ate away at her. Nia knew she couldn't keep this secret forever. Eventually, her parents would notice. The village would notice. And when they did, she had no idea how she would explain herself. At night, Nia would lie awake, her hand resting on her stomach, wondering what kind of future lay ahead for her and her unborn child. She imagined the scorn of the villagers, the disappointment in her parents' eyes, the shame she would bring upon her family. The fear was overwhelming, but there was nothing she could do to change the past. All she could do now was face the consequences of her choices. But how? How could she face them when she couldn't even face herself? Days turned into weeks, and Nia's secret grew harder to hide. The loose clothes she wore were barely enough to conceal the swelling of her belly, and she found herself constantly aware of every glance, every look from the villagers, wondering if they could see through her disguise. Every morning, she awoke with a knot of fear in her stomach, terrified that today would be the day someone noticed. Her parents, Juma and Amoni, remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in their daughter's life. They were proud of Nia's recent behavior, believing that her sudden quietness and reserved nature were signs that she was finally maturing and taking her studies seriously. They had no idea that the real reason for Nia's silence was the fear consuming her. One evening, as Nia helped her mother prepare dinner, Amoni looked at her daughter with a soft smile. "You've been so focused lately, Nia. It's good to see you taking responsibility for your future." Nia forced a smile, but inside, her heart ached. The guilt was unbearable. How could she let her mother believe in a future that was no longer possible? How could she look her parents in the eyes when she knew that her actions had already shattered their hopes and dreams for her? As her mother continued talking about village matters, Nia's mind wandered. She thought of Kofi, wondering where he was now. Had he moved on, completely forgetting about her and the child growing inside her? Did he even care about the pain and fear he had left behind? At night, Nia's dreams were filled with images of her unborn child. Sometimes, she dreamed of holding the baby, feeling its warmth and hearing its soft cries. Other times, she dreamed of the village discovering her secret, the shame and disgrace falling upon her family like a dark cloud. Each morning, Nia would wake from these dreams, her heart pounding, and she would press a hand to her growing belly, feeling the life inside her. The reality of her situation was becoming more and more tangible with each passing day. She couldn't run from it forever. One afternoon, as Nia walked home from the market, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a window. For a moment, she froze, staring at the image of herself. The change in her body was undeniable now. The curve of her belly was obvious, and soon, it would be impossible to hide. Panic gripped her heart. What was she going to do? How could she explain this to her parents? To the village? The walls were closing in on her, and she had no escape. That night, as Nia lay in bed, she knew she had to make a decision. She couldn't continue like this, living in fear and hiding from the truth. But the thought of telling her parents was too terrifying to bear. How could she face them, knowing the disappointment and anger they would feel? Nia's mind raced, searching for a solution. And then, as the moonlight streamed through the window, an idea began to form in her mind. A desperate, dangerous idea. She couldn't stay in the village. Not like this. There was only one option left: she had to leave. The decision to leave weighed heavily on Nia's mind. She had never imagined that her life would take such a turn, that she would find herself contemplating running away from everything she had ever known. But the more she thought about it, the more it seemed like the only choice. She couldn't stay in Imora. Sooner or later, her secret would be revealed, and the consequences would be too much to bear. That night, as Nia lay in bed, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her parents' voices drifting through the walls from the living room. Curious, she quietly slipped out of bed and moved closer to the doorway, listening to their conversation. "I'm worried about Nia," Amoni said, her voice tinged with concern. "She's been acting so different lately. She's quieter than usual, and she hardly spends time with her friends anymore." Jumo's voice was calm, reassuring. "She's just growing up, Amoni. Maybe she's finally starting to take things seriously. She's at that age where girls begin to change." Amoni sighed. "I know, but I can't help but feel like something's not right. She doesn't look well sometimes. Have you noticed how pale she's been?" There was a pause before Jumo replied. "She's probably just tired. She's been helping around the house more, and maybe it's taking a toll on her. Don't worry too much, Amoni. Nia is a strong girl. She'll be fine." Nia pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling the sob that threatened to escape. Her parents' words were filled with love and concern, but they had no idea what was really happening. They had no idea that their daughter was carrying a burden so heavy it was crushing her. As she listened to their conversation, the guilt inside Nia grew stronger. How could she leave them without telling them the truth? How could she just disappear from their lives, knowing how much they loved her? But then, the fear crept back in. If she stayed, the shame would be unbearable. The village would judge her, and her parents would be humiliated. It was better to leave now, before they found out. At least that way, she could spare them the pain. Nia returned to her bed, her mind swirling with emotions. She knew that time was running out. If she was going to leave, it had to be soon. Her belly was growing every day, and it wouldn't be long before she could no longer hide it. As she lay there, staring up at the ceiling, Nia whispered to herself, "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm sorry, Papa." Tears filled her eyes, and she wiped them away with trembling hands. She knew what she had to do. It was the only way. Nia woke the next morning with a sense of finality. Her decision had been made, and there was no turning back. She had to leave before her secret was discovered, before the shame consumed her and her family. But the thought of leaving everything behind, her home, her parents, the village she had known all her life, filled her with a deep sadness. The pressure of shame weighed heavily on her heart. She had seen it happen before in Emora, how villagers treated those who fell out of favor. The whispers, the judgmental looks, the quiet rejection. It was a fate worse than any punishment, and Nia couldn't bear the thought of her parents facing that because of her. As she went about her chores that day, Nia tried to act normal, but her mind was elsewhere, planning her escape. She had little money saved, only a few belongings she could carry. Where would she go? How would she survive in the city of Savannah, where she knew no one? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but it was better than staying. That afternoon, Nia walked past a group of girls from the village, her former friends. They were laughing and chatting, completely unaware of the storm raging inside her. Once, she had been a part of their circle, but now, she felt like an outsider, as though she no longer belonged. Her secret had created a wall between her and the life she once knew. One of the girls, Aisha, noticed Nia and waved. "Nia, come join us," she called out, her voice cheerful. Nia hesitated, forcing a smile. "Maybe later," she replied, her heart heavy. She knew she couldn't stay with them, pretending everything was fine. Her time in the village was running out, and soon, she would be gone. As she continued walking, Nia's thoughts turned to her parents. How would they react when they found her gone? Would they worry? Would they be angry? She imagined her mother crying, her father pacing the house, trying to understand why she had left without a word. The image brought tears to Nia's eyes. She hated the thought of hurting them, but it was better this way. They would eventually move on, and the village would forget about her. It was the only way to protect them from the shame of her choices. That night, Nia packed a small bag with her clothes, a few personal items, and the little money she had saved over the years. As she stood in her room, looking around at the familiar surroundings, the bed she had slept in since childhood, the handmade decorations on the walls, the small window that looked out onto the village, she felt a deep sense of loss. This was her home. These were her memories. And yet, she had no choice but to leave it all behind. Nia sat down at her small desk and grabbed a piece of paper. She scribbled a quick note to her parents, her hands shaking as she wrote. "I'm sorry. I love you. Please don't look for me." With trembling hands, she folded the note and placed it on her bed. A final goodbye. As dawn broke over the village of Emora, Nia stood by the doorway of her home, her small bag clutched tightly in her hand. The early morning light filtered through the trees, casting long shadows over the quiet village. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat reminding her that this would be the last time she would see her home, her family, her life as she knew it. The note she had left on her bed weighed heavily on her mind. She had kept the words brief, but they carried the weight of everything she couldn't bring herself to say in person. "I'm sorry. I love you. Please don't look for me." Those words were all she could manage, but they felt inadequate compared to the enormity of what she was about to do. Nia knew that once her parents found the note, they would be heartbroken. Her mother, Amoni, would cry, and her father, Juma, would likely storm through the village, searching for her. But she couldn't let herself think about that now. If she stayed, they would find out about her pregnancy, and the shame would be too much for them to bear. Running away was the only way she could protect them and herself. With a deep breath, Nia stepped out into the early morning air. The village was still asleep, the only sound the distant rustle of leaves in the wind. She moved quickly, her footsteps light and cautious as she made her way toward the bus station at the edge of the village. Her heart raced with every step, her mind swelling with doubts and fears. What if someone saw her? What if her parents woke up before she was gone? The fear of being caught clung to her like a shadow, but she pressed on. She had come too far to turn back now. As Nia reached the small bus station, her hands trembled with nervous energy. A few old buses were lined up, their engines silent, waiting to carry passengers to the far-off city of Zayana. The bus station attendant, an elderly man with a weathered face, sat behind the counter, reading a newspaper. He looked up as Nia approached. "One ticket, please," Nia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "To wherever the next bus is going." The attendant raised an eyebrow but didn't ask any questions. He tore off a ticket from the roll and handed it to her. "Next bus is to Zayana," he said. "Leaves in 10 minutes." Nia nodded, handing over most of her money for the ticket. She couldn't believe this was happening. Zayana, the city she had only ever heard about in stories. It was a world away from the peaceful village life she had known, and the thought of it filled her with both excitement and fear. As she waited for the bus, Nia's mind raced with thoughts of her family. She imagined her parents waking up to find her gone, their shock, their worry. A part of her wanted to run back home, to tear up the note and pretend this had all been a bad dream. But it was too late for that now. The decision had been made. The sound of the bus engine starting up pulled Nia from her thoughts. She watched as the large vehicle pulled up in front of her, its doors hissing open. With one last glance at the village she had called home for 14 years, Nia stepped onto the bus, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. As the bus lurched forward, Nia stared out the window, watching as the familiar sights of Imora faded into the distance. Her village, her family, her life, all disappearing behind her as the road to Zayana stretched out ahead. The journey was long, and as the hours passed, Nia's thoughts drifted to the unknown future that awaited her. What would life be like in Zayana? Would she be able to survive in the bustling city, all alone and with no money? And what would happen when her child was born? She placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the weight of her unborn child. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. "I don't know what we are going to do, but I promise I'll find a way." The bus rumbled on, carrying Nia farther from the only life she had ever known and deeper into the uncertainty of the future. The bus ride to Zayana seemed to stretch on forever. Nia sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the passing landscape. The rolling hills and familiar trees of Imora slowly gave way to open plains and distant mountains, the horizon stretching farther than she had ever seen before. The vastness of the world outside her village was both exhilarating and terrifying. As the hours passed, the other passengers on the bus paid little attention to Nia. They were absorbed in their own conversations or lost in their thoughts, oblivious to the turmoil swirling inside her. Nia felt a strange sense of isolation, as if she were moving through a dream where everything was both familiar and foreign at the same time. Her thoughts drifted back to her parents. She wondered if they had found her note yet, if they were searching for her. The image of her mother's tearful face and her father's angry pacing flashed in her mind, and Nia's chest tightened with guilt. She had never wanted to hurt them, but she had felt like there was no other choice. As the bus rolled on, Nia's mind wandered to the stories she had heard about Zayana. The city was nothing like Imara. It was a place of noise and movement, filled with strangers and towering buildings. The people who lived there were said to be different, more distant, more focused on themselves. Nia had never been to a city before, and the thought of navigating such a place on her own made her stomach churn with anxiety. What would she do when she arrived? She had no plan, no one to turn to. The little money she had left after buying the bus ticket wouldn't last long. And once her pregnancy became obvious, she knew that finding help would be even harder. The weight of her situation pressed down on her, but Nia tried to push the fear away. She had to stay strong. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. There was no turning back. After several hours, the landscape began to change. The wide open plains gave way to more developed areas, and Nia saw the outlines of buildings in the distance. Her heart raced as the bus approached the outskirts of Zayana. The city was enormous, far larger than anything she had imagined. Tall buildings loomed in the distance, and the roads were filled with people, carts, and vehicles moving in all directions. The bus came to a stop at a bustling station, and Nia felt a wave of panic wash over her. She wasn't ready. She wasn't prepared for this. But there was no time to think. The other passengers were already gathering their belongings and stepping off the bus. Nia took a deep breath, clutching her small bag tightly as she followed the crowd. When she stepped off the bus, the noise and energy of the city hit her all at once. People were everywhere, shouting, hurrying, pushing past each other. The air smelled of street food and dust, and the noise of honking horns and chattering voices filled her ears. Zayana was nothing like Imara. It was chaotic, overwhelming, and alien. Nia stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do next. She had never felt so lost, so small. The city stretched out before her like a maze, each street filled with strangers and possibilities, none of which she could grasp. Clutching her bag, Nia began to walk. She didn't know where she was going, but she couldn't stay at the station forever. She kept her head down, trying not to draw attention to herself as she weaved through the crowds. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light over the city. Nia's stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since early that morning. She passed by food vendors, the smell of roasted meat and fried dough making her mouth water. But she had no money to spare. She had to be careful with what little she had. As the shadows grew longer, Nia's fear deepened. She had no place to stay, no plan for the night. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. She was alone, pregnant, and lost in a city that didn't care about her. The weight of it all pressed down on her, and for the first time, Nia felt truly afraid. What had she done? How could she possibly survive here? She kept walking, her feet aching and her heart heavy. The city seemed to swallow her whole, and as night fell, Nia's only thought was to find a place to rest, somewhere safe, where she could hide from the world for just a little while. As night fell, the bustling city of Zayana took on an entirely different atmosphere. The daylight that had illuminated the streets faded, and the once bustling market area grew eerily quiet. Only the faint glow of street lamps illuminated the narrow alleyways and the scattered groups of people who remained out in the cool night air. Nia's heart pounded as she wandered aimlessly, her small bag clutched tightly to her chest. The fear that had been bubbling inside her since she left Imora now threatened to overwhelm her. The enormity of what she had done was beginning to sink in. She was alone in a city that was far larger and more dangerous than she had ever imagined, with no money, no food, and no idea of where to go. Her stomach growled loudly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten all day. The vendors she had passed earlier with their delicious-smelling food were long gone now, their carts packed up for the night. Nia felt her desperation growing with each passing moment. She needed help, but there was no one to turn to. The faces of the people in Savannah were unfamiliar, and no one seemed to notice the young girl wandering the streets with fear in her eyes. As she walked, Nia passed groups of people sitting by the roadside, some talking loudly, others lying in the shadows, asleep or lost in their own struggles. The sight made her feel even more lost. Was this what awaited her? Would she become just another forgotten face among the many who had come to Savannah seeking a better life, only to be swallowed by the city's indifference? Nia stopped in front of a closed shop, leaning against the door as she tried to catch her breath. Her legs ached from walking, and her body felt weak from hunger. She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill over. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to herself. "How did I end up like this?" The reality of her situation felt crushing. She had left Imora to escape the shame and fear of her pregnancy, but now she was facing a far greater fear, the fear of survival in an unforgiving city where she was invisible to everyone. Just as Nia was about to move on, she noticed an elderly woman locking up a small shop nearby. The woman, dressed in a colorful but worn shawl, seemed to be the last shopkeeper left on the street. Desperation pushed Nia forward. Maybe this woman could help her, even just for the night. Nia hesitated for a moment before approaching the woman, her voice trembling. "Excuse me, ma'am," she began, her words barely audible. "I'm new here, and I'm lost. I don't have anywhere to go. Could you help me, please?" The elderly woman paused, her hand on the shop door as she turned to look at Nia. Her eyes, sharp and filled with suspicion, scanned Nia from head to toe. "You're lost?" she asked, her voice filled with doubt. "What are you doing out here at this time of night, child? Where are your parents?" Nia felt a lump in her throat as she tried to explain. I don't have anyone," she stammered. "I left my home because I was scared. I just need somewhere to stay for the night, and I promise I'll leave in the morning." The woman's expression softened for a moment, but then it hardened again. She shook her head, clearly weary. "This is not a place for a young girl to be wandering alone at night," she said, her voice stern. "And if you left your home, then you must have a reason. I don't want to get involved in your troubles." Nia's heart sank. "Please," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what else to do." The woman looked at her for a long moment, her face a mixture of concern and irritation. But then she shook her head again. "I'm sorry, child. I can't help you. I have my own problems to deal with." She finished locking the door and began walking away, leaving Nia standing alone, the weight of rejection pressing down on her like a heavy stone. Nia watched the woman disappear into the night, her hope slipping away with each step. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The city felt more dangerous now, with its shadowy alleyways and silent, uncaring streets. The fear she had been pushing down since leaving Imora now surged to the surface, threatening to overwhelm her. Feeling utterly defeated, Nia continued walking. Her feet dragged against the dirt, her body weak from exhaustion. She needed a place to rest, but the streets were growing darker, and the city more intimidating by the minute. After wandering for what felt like hours, Nia found herself in a quieter part of the city, away from the bustling center. There, she spotted a large tree, its branches stretching wide, casting long shadows in the moonlight. With nowhere else to turn, she made her way to the base of the tree and sat down, leaning against its rough bark. The tree offered some shelter from the cold night air, but it wasn't much. Nia hugged her knees to her chest, trying to find some warmth and comfort in the darkness. She closed her eyes, her body aching from the long day, and prayed silently for some kind of miracle, anything that could help her survive this nightmare. But as the hours passed and the city grew quieter, Nia's fears only deepened. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, and every sound in the night made her jump. She wasn't safe here, but she had no choice. This was all she had. Mia tried to calm her racing heart, but the fear of what might come next kept her wide awake. She had survived the journey to Savannah, but now, the true test was just beginning. Mia wasn't sure how long she sat under the tree, her back pressed against its rough bark, her body aching from exhaustion. The city had grown eerily quiet, the bustling noise of the day replaced by the occasional distant shout or the rustle of wind through the narrow streets. She knew she couldn't stay there all night, exposed and vulnerable, but the weight of her fear and exhaustion left her paralyzed. Just when she thought she couldn't go on, Mia heard the soft echo of footsteps approaching. Her heart raced as she opened her eyes and peered through the darkness. A group of young men, their voices loud and their movements unsteady, were making their way down the street, laughing and talking boisterously. Panic surged through Mia's veins as the men drew closer. She had no idea what they wanted, but every instinct told her to run. Without thinking, Mia jumped to her feet, her legs shaking beneath her as she started to move away from the tree. The men noticed her immediately. "Hey, where are you going, girl?" one of them called out, his voice slurred. Mia didn't stop to answer. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest as the men's voices grew louder behind her. They were following her, and the fear clawed at her throat. She had to get away. Her feet pounded against the dirt as she ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The streets blurred around her as she darted through the city's narrow alleys, desperate to lose them. But no matter how fast she ran, their footsteps followed, the sound of their laughter chasing her through the night. Mia's mind raced. She had to find shelter, somewhere to hide. But where? The streets seemed endless, and the towering buildings only made her feel more trapped. And then, in the distance, she saw it, a small shrine tucked between two buildings. Its stone structure was old and worn, but the soft glow of candles inside offered a flicker of hope. Without thinking, Mia sprinted toward it, her feet barely touching the ground as she pushed through the wooden door and collapsed inside. Her breath came in shallow bursts as she pressed her back against the cold stone wall, her body trembling with fear and exhaustion. The shrine was small and empty, its only inhabitants the flickering candles that lined the altar. But it was safe. For now, it was enough. Mia could hear the men's voices outside, growing fainter as they moved on, unaware of where she had hidden. Relief flooded through her, and she closed her eyes, leaning her head back against the wall. She had escaped. But for how long? As the adrenaline faded, Mia's body gave in to the exhaustion that had been building for days. Her eyes grew heavy, and before she knew it, she had drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep, her fears momentarily forgotten. When Mia awoke, it was morning. The sunlight streamed through the small windows of the shrine, casting soft rays across the stone floor. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. But then the memories of the night before came flooding back, the bus ride, the streets of Savannah, the men chasing her. And now, the shrine. Mia slowly sat up, wincing as her muscles protested. She had been running on fear and adrenaline for so long that her body felt like it was about to give out. But as she looked around the small shrine, something shifted inside her. She had survived the night. She had made it through. Standing, Mia moved to the altar at the front of the shrine. There, she saw offerings left by other visitors, coins, flowers, small trinkets. The candles had burned down, their flames flickering weakly. Mia didn't know much about the spirits the shrine was dedicated to, but in that moment, she felt a sense of connection to something greater than herself. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and filled with gratitude. "Thank you for keeping me safe." She didn't know what the day would bring, but for the first time since arriving in Savannah, Mia felt a glimmer of hope. The city may have been overwhelming and terrifying, but she was still here. She had survived. And now, she would find a way to survive again. As the soft morning light filtered through the small shrine, Nia's heart beat with a new sense of purpose. She had survived her first night in the overwhelming city of Zayana, and though fear still clung to her like a shadow, the safety she had found in the shrine brought her a glimmer of hope. But she couldn't stay hidden here forever. She needed to figure out her next move. Nia sat quietly on the stone floor, her eyes scanning the room. The shrine was simple and small, but it had offered her refuge when she needed it most. The faint scent of burning incense lingered in the air, and the soft glow of candles provided a sense of calm. She didn't know who had built this shrine or what spirits it honored, but in this moment, Nia felt grateful for its existence. As she was about to stand and leave, the wooden door creaked open. Nia's breath caught in her throat as an elderly woman entered the shrine. The woman wore a long, flowing robe adorned with symbols of the forest and carried a wooden staff decorated with small trinkets and feathers. Her hair was white as snow, and her eyes held the wisdom of many years. The woman paused when she saw Nia sitting by the altar, her eyes narrowing slightly in curiosity. "Child," the woman said softly, her voice calm and soothing, "what brings you to the sacred shrine of the forest spirits?" Nia's heart raced as she stood, unsure of how to answer. She had never heard of this shrine before, and she wasn't sure if she was supposed to be there. "I'm sorry," Nia stammered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to intrude. I was just looking for a place to stay the night, and I found this shrine. Please, I'll leave right away if I'm not supposed to be here." The elderly woman studied Nia for a long moment, her gaze piercing but not unkind. Finally, she shook her head and smiled softly. "You need not fear, child. The spirits of this shrine welcome all who seek refuge, especially those in need. You are safe here." Nia felt a wave of relief wash over her, but the woman's words sparked her curiosity. "The spirits?" Nia asked hesitantly. "Do they protect this place?" The woman nodded slowly, her eyes shining with reverence. "Yes. This shrine is dedicated to the ancient spirits of the forest. They have watched over our lands for centuries, guiding and protecting those who honor them. And it seems they have guided you here as well." Nia's mind whirled. She had grown up hearing stories of spirits and ancestors, but she had never experienced anything like this. Could it be true that the spirits had led her to this shrine, protecting her from the dangers of the city? The woman gestured for Nia to sit beside her. "Come, child. Tell me your story. I can see that you carry a heavy burden, one that you cannot bear alone." For a moment, Nia hesitated. She had spent so long hiding her secret, running from the truth, that the thought of sharing it with someone was both terrifying and a relief. But something about the woman's gentle presence made Nia feel safe, as if she could finally let go of the weight she had been carrying. Taking a deep breath, Nia began to speak. She told the woman everything about her life in Imora, her relationship with Kofi, and the discovery of her pregnancy. She spoke of her fear of bringing shame to her family, her decision to run away, and the terror she had felt when she arrived in Zayana with no plan and no hope. The woman listened in silence, her expression thoughtful but never judgmental. When Nia finished, tears filled her eyes. "I don't know what to do," Nia whispered. "I thought leaving was the only way to protect my family, but now I'm here, and I have no idea how to survive." The woman reached out and gently placed a hand on Nia's shoulder. "You are strong, child, stronger than you realize. The spirits have led you here for a reason. They have not abandoned you, and neither will I." Nia looked up, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Who are you?" she asked softly. The woman smiled. "I am the priestess of this shrine, a servant of the forest spirits. My name is Malia. I care for this sacred place and offer guidance to those who seek it." Nia nodded, feeling a deep sense of comfort in Malia's presence. For the first time since she had left Imora, Nia didn't feel completely alone. There was someone who understood, someone who could help. Malia rose from her seat and motioned for Nia to follow her. "Come, child. You will stay here with me for now. The spirits have brought you to this shrine, and I will help you find your way forward." In the days that followed, Nia found solace in the presence of Malia and the peaceful atmosphere of the shrine. Each morning, the soft light of dawn filtered through the trees, casting a golden glow over the small stone building. Malia would rise early, tending to the altar and offering prayers to the forest spirits, while Nia helped where she could. Though Nia had no experience in the ways of the spirits, she felt a growing sense of peace as she assisted Malia with her daily rituals. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the city outside, and for a while, Nia was able to forget her daily rituals. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of the city outside, and for a while, Nia was able to forget her troubles, but despite the calm of the shrine, Nia knew she couldn't stay hidden there forever. She still had no plan for the future, and the reality of her pregnancy weighed heavily on her. Her belly was beginning to show, and soon, she wouldn't be able to hide it. One evening, as the sun began to set, Malia called Nia to sit with her by the shrine's entrance. The two sat in silence for a while, watching as the last rays of sunlight bathed the city in a soft, golden hue. "Nia," Malia said gently, breaking the silence. "You cannot stay here forever. I sense that the spirits have a different path for you, one that you must walk on your own. But you do not have to do it alone." Nia looked at the priestess, her heart heavy with uncertainty. "I don't know where to go," she admitted. "I have no family here, no money, no way to support myself. What can I do?" Malia's eyes softened with compassion. "There is a small village on the outskirts of Savannah, not far from here. The people there are kind, and they live simple, peaceful lives. I have many friends in that village who can offer you shelter and help you as you prepare for the birth of your child." Nia's heart lifted at the thought of a new village, a place where she could start over. "Do you think they'll accept me?" she asked quietly. "Even with my past?" Malia nodded firmly. "They will. The people of this village understand hardship and forgiveness. You will find safety there." The idea of leaving the city and finding refuge in a peaceful village was tempting. For the first time in weeks, Nia felt a glimmer of hope. She could raise her child in a place far from the shame and fear that had driven her away from Imora. "When can I go?" Nia asked, her voice filled with determination. Malia smiled. "We will leave at dawn. I will take you the next morning." Just as the first light of day began to creep over the horizon, Nia and Malia set out on their journey. The priestess had packed a small bag of provisions, and they walked side by side through the quiet streets of Savannah, leaving the bustling city behind. As they moved farther from the city, the landscape began to change. The tall buildings and crowded streets gave way to open fields and rolling hills, and the air felt fresher, cleaner. Nia breathed deeply, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. The noise and chaos of the city had been overwhelming, but now, surrounded by nature, she felt a calm she hadn't experienced in weeks. After several hours of walking, they reached the outskirts of Savannah. The village Malia had spoken of was nestled in a valley surrounded by lush greenery, with small huts made of wood and straw scattered across the landscape. The villagers were busy with their daily tasks, tending to crops, caring for livestock, and gathering water from the nearby stream. Malia led Nia to a small hut at the edge of the village, where an elderly woman stood outside, her face lighting up with recognition when she saw Malia. "Priestess Malia," the woman called out, her voice filled with warmth. "It's been too long since we last saw you." Malia smiled and embraced the woman. "Yes, it has, Eo. I have brought someone who is in need of your kindness and shelter." Eo looked at Nia, her eyes softening with understanding. "Of course," she said gently. "You are welcome here, child." Come inside and rest." Nia followed Eo into the hut, her heart swelling with gratitude. The small home was simple but warm, with a fire crackling in the hearth and the soft scent of herbs filling the air. Eo motioned for Nia to sit by the fire, and Nia sank into the chair, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. "You're safe here," Eo said softly. "Whatever troubles you faced, you can leave them behind. This village will take care of you." Tears filled Nia's eyes as she nodded, her voice catching in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." Eo smiled kindly. "You don't need to worry about that now. You're home." For the first time in what felt like forever, Nia allowed herself to relax. She was no longer running. She had found a place where she could rest, a place where she could start over. The village on the outskirts of Savannah would be her new home, and here, she would build a life for herself and her child. Days in the peaceful village passed slowly, filled with the quiet rhythm of life. Nia spent her mornings helping Eo with simple chores around the hut and the village, learning the ways of her new home. The people were kind and welcoming, offering her food and guidance without asking too many questions. It was a far cry from the busy, chaotic life she had left behind in Savannah. Yet, as the days passed, Nia's belly grew, a constant reminder of the life she carried inside her. The reality of her pregnancy settled in with a mix of excitement and fear. She was going to become a mother soon, and though she had found refuge in this village, the uncertainty of her future loomed large in her mind. One morning, Nia sat outside the hut, her hands resting on her swollen belly as she watched the village children play by the stream. Their laughter filled the air, light and carefree, and for a moment, Nia allowed herself to imagine her own child running among them one day. The thought brought a smile to her face, but it was quickly replaced by worry. Would she be able to provide for her child? Could she raise a child alone in this village, far from her family and everything she had ever known? Eo, noticing the concern on Nia's face, came to sit beside her. "You've been quiet lately, Nia," Eo said gently. "What's troubling you?" Nia sighed, her fingers tracing absent-mindedly over her belly. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know how I'm going to take care of this child. I don't have any money or skills to offer the village. What if I'm not strong enough to do this alone?" Eo smiled warmly, placing a comforting hand on Nia's shoulder. "You are stronger than you think, child. You have already survived so much. And you won't be alone. The people of this village will help you, just as they have helped many others who have come here in need." Nia nodded, her heart lightened by Eo's words. But there was still a part of her that felt uncertain, as if the weight of the future was too heavy for her to bear alone. Later that day, as Nia helped Eo gather herbs in the nearby forest, the two women walked in companionable silence. The forest was cool and quiet, the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees creating a peaceful atmosphere. Eo pointed out various plants and their medicinal uses, teaching Nia how to identify them and harvest them properly. As they walked, Nia found herself thinking about Malia, the priestess who had guided her to this village. It had been several days since Malia had left, but Nia still felt the warmth of her guidance. The forest spirits had watched over her, just as Malia had said. Perhaps there was a reason she had been brought to this village. As they returned to the village with their basket of herbs, Eo stopped and looked at Nia with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Nia, you have the strength of the forest within you," Eo said. "You may not realize it now, but you have a deep connection to the land and the spirits. The same strength that brought you here will carry you forward, no matter what challenges lie ahead." Nia felt a warmth spread through her chest at Eo's words. She had never thought of herself as strong, but perhaps Eo was right. She had survived the hardships of leaving her family, the fear of being alone in Savannah, and the uncertainty of her pregnancy. And now, in this village, she had found a new sense of purpose. As Nia prepared for the arrival of her child, she began to feel a growing sense of confidence. She would not let fear hold her back any longer. She would face whatever came her way with the strength she had discovered within herself. Weeks passed, and the day Nia had both feared and anticipated finally arrived. It was early morning when the first sharp pain rippled through her body, waking her from a restless sleep. She knew, instantly, that her time had come. The baby was ready. Nia gripped the edge of her bed as another wave of pain washed over her, stronger this time. Her breath came in short, uneven gasps as she tried to steady herself, but her heart raced with a mixture of fear and excitement. She had been preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, the reality of it hit her with full force. "Ayo!" Nia called out, her voice trembling. Ayo rushed into the room, her face calm but alert. "It's time, isn't it?" she asked, already moving to help Nia lie down. Nia nodded, her breath catching as another contraction gripped her. The pain was intense, unlike anything she had ever experienced before, but Ayo's presence was a comfort. The older woman moved with practiced ease, preparing warm water and clean cloths, offering Nia soothing words of encouragement. "Just breathe, Nia," Ayo said softly. "You're doing well. The baby will be here soon." As the hours passed, Nia's world became a blur of pain and exhaustion. She could feel her body working, each contraction bringing her closer to the moment when she would meet her child. Ayo stayed by her side, offering support and guidance, but the intensity of the experience made it hard for Nia to focus on anything but the task at hand. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Nia felt the pressure shift. The pain reached its peak, and with a final, agonizing push, the room was filled with the sound of a baby's first cry. Tears filled Nia's eyes as she collapsed back onto the bed, her body shaking with relief and exhaustion. She had done it. Her child was here. Ayo gently cleaned the newborn, wrapping him in a soft cloth before placing him in Nia's arms. "It's a boy," Ayo said with a smile. "He's beautiful." Nia looked down at the tiny face of her son, her heart swelling with an overwhelming love she had never known before. The baby's eyes were closed, his face scrunched in protest at the sudden cold of the world outside the womb, but as he settled against her chest, he grew quiet, soothed by the sound of her heartbeat. "Kai," Nia whispered softly, the name she had chosen for him long ago. "You are my strength." In that moment, all of Nia's fears and doubts melted away. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain: she would protect her son with everything she had. Kai was hers, and she was his mother. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Life in the village continued, but for Nia, everything had changed. With Kai in her arms, she felt both a newfound sense of purpose and the weight of responsibility. The villagers were supportive, offering food, advice, and help with the baby, but Nia quickly realized that raising a child was far more difficult than she had anticipated. Kai was a healthy, strong baby, but he cried often, especially at nights, leaving Nia exhausted. The sleepless nights and long days blurred together as she struggled to balance caring for Kai with helping Ayo around the hut. Every cry, every whimper from her son tugged at her heart, filling her with a mix of love and frustration. One afternoon, as Nia tried to calm Kai's cries, Ayo came to sit beside her, watching the young mother with a knowing smile. "The first months are always the hardest," Ayo said gently. "But you're doing well, Nia. Kai is a strong, healthy boy, and that's because of you." Nia sighed, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. "I just want to be a good mother," she whispered. "But sometimes, I feel like I'm failing. He cries so much, and I don't always know what he needs." Ayo reached out and touched Nia's hand. "You're not failing, child. You're learning. Every mother goes through this, and it's normal to feel overwhelmed. But look at how he looks at you when you hold him. You are his world, and that's all that matters." Nia looked down at Kai, who had finally settled in her arms. His tiny hand gripped her finger, and his eyes fluttered closed as he drifted off to sleep. A wave of love washed over Nia, stronger than any doubt or fear. She would learn, she would grow, and she would do whatever it took to give her son a good life. As the weeks went by, Nia found her rhythm. The villagers helped her adjust to the demands of motherhood, teaching her how to soothe Kai when he cried and how to care for him as he grew. Ao, especially, became like a second mother to Nia, offering wisdom and support when Nia needed it most. But even with the help of the village, Nia still faced challenges. The fear of her past catching up to her lingered in the back of her mind. She wondered if her parents ever thought of her, if they had searched for her in Imora. And she wondered about Kofi, the boy who had abandoned her. Did he know about Kai? Did he care? Nia pushed these thoughts away whenever they surfaced. She couldn't afford to dwell on the past. Her future was here, with her son, in this quiet village. And no matter what happened, she would protect Kai with all her strength. As the days passed, the people of the village embraced Nia and Kai as their own. They were a close-knit community, and it wasn't long before Nia became a part of their daily lives. Whenever she needed help, there was always someone willing to offer a hand. Whether it was with food, child-rearing advice, or simply keeping an eye on Kai while she rested, the villagers made sure Nia never felt alone. One of Nia's closest supporters was a young woman named Kesai, who had 3 children of her own. Kesai had a calm, patient demeanor that immediately put Nia at ease. She often came by to check on Nia and Kai, bringing herbs for colic or a warm meal when she could see that Nia was exhausted. "You're doing better than I did with my firstborn," Kesai said with a laugh one day as they sat together by the fire. "I was a nervous wreck for months." Nia smiled, feeling the warmth of Kesai's friendship. "I'm still learning," she said, bouncing Kai gently on her knee. "It helps having people like you around." Kesai leaned in and smiled at Kai, who was wide-eyed and fascinated by the flames in the hearth. "He's growing quickly," she said, brushing a finger against his cheek. "Strong, like his mother." Nia blushed at the compliment. She still didn't always feel strong, but the support from Kesai and the other villagers made her believe that she could be the mother Kai needed her to be. The village, though small, was vibrant. There were regular festivals to honor the harvest and the spirits that washed over the land. Music, dancing, and laughter filled the air during these celebrations, and even the hardest days seemed to end with joy and connection. Nia attended these festivals, often with Kai strapped to her back, watching as the villagers celebrated the simple beauty of life. One evening, during one such celebration, Nia stood by the fire pit, watching the villagers dance. The rhythmic beat of the drums echoed in the night air, and the flickering flames cast a warm glow over the village square. Nia swayed gently with Kai, who was dozing in her arms, lulled to sleep by the music. As she watched the people dance, Nia felt a deep sense of belonging. This village had become her home, and the people had become her family. They had welcomed her without question, and their kindness had given her the strength to move forward. It was a far cry from the loneliness and fear she had felt when she first arrived in Zayana. Still, there were moments when the weight of her past crept into her thoughts. She wondered how her parents were doing, if they had ever found the note she left behind. She hadn't told anyone in the village the full story of why she had left Imora, and though the villagers never cried, Nia knew that someday she would have to confront the past. But for now, she focused on the present. Kai was healthy and growing, and the village was a safe, nurturing place for them both. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Nia knew she had the support of the village to help her through it. As the seasons changed, Nia became more integrated into village life. Her days were filled with caring for Kai, helping Ao with daily tasks, and learning the traditions of the village. But there was one tradition that intrigued Nia more than any other: the village's deep connection to the forest spirits. The villagers believed that the spirits of the forest guided and protected them, and each family had its own rituals to honor the spirits. Nia had heard of these beliefs in her childhood, but here in the village, the presence of the spirits felt real, tangible. Every harvest, every birth, and every significant event was marked by offerings and prayers to the spirits, who are believed to watch over the people and ensure their well-being. One evening, as Nia sat by the fire with Ale, she finally gathered the courage to ask about the spirits. "Do you really believe that the spirits are with us, watching over us?" Nia asked, her voice quiet but filled with curiosity. Ale looked at Nia with wise eyes. "Yes, child. The spirits have always been with us. They live in the trees, the rivers, the mountains. They guide us in ways we cannot always see, but they are always present." Nia thought of her journey to Savannah and the village, how she had been lost and desperate until she found the shrine and Malia, the priestess who had guided her. Could it be that the spirits had been guiding her all along? Ao seemed to sense Nia's thoughts and smiled. "You have felt their presence, haven't you?" Nia hesitated, then nodded. "I think so. When I was lost in Savannah, I found the shrine where Malia helped me. It felt like something was guiding me there, even though I didn't know where I was going." Ao's smile widened. "The spirits are wise. They bring us where we need to be, even when we don't understand it at the time." Nia's heart swelled with a sense of gratitude. The journey that had brought her to this village had been filled with fear and uncertainty, but now, sitting by the fire with Ao and holding Kai in her arms, she realized that she had been protected all along. A few days later, the village held a special ceremony to honor the forest spirits. Nia had seen many ceremonies since arriving in the village, but this one was different. It was a ceremony to bless the children of the village, offering them protection and guidance from the spirits as they grew. Nia was invited to bring Kai to the ceremony, and though she was nervous, she felt honored. The villagers gathered in the clearing at the edge of the forest, where a sacred altar had been set up. Offerings of fruit, flowers, and herbs were placed before the altar, and the village elders led prayers to the spirits. Nia held Kai close as the priestess, an elderly woman draped in robes, approached them. The priestess looked at Kai, her eyes soft with understanding. "This child is special," she said softly, her voice filled with reverence. "He carries the strength of the spirits within him." Nia felt a shiver run down her spine at the priestess's words. She had always believed that Kai was special, but hearing it from the priestess made her heart swell with pride. The priestess placed her hands on Kai's forehead, murmuring a prayer to the spirits. "May the spirits of the forest guide you, protect you, and fill you with their wisdom," she whispered. "You are blessed, little one." As the ceremony continued, Nia felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. Kai had been blessed by the spirits, and in that moment, Nia knew that they would be washed over, no matter what challenges they faced. Life in the village continued peacefully after the ceremony, but Nia couldn't shake a feeling of unease that had been growing within her. The blessing of the spirits had brought her comfort, but the weight of her past still lingered in the back of her mind. She had escaped the fear and shame she had felt in Imora, but that didn't mean her past had disappeared. One afternoon, as Nia was gathering herbs in the forest with Kesai, they overheard two villagers talking as they passed by. "Did you hear about the trader who came to Savannah last week?" one of them said in a low voice. "He's been asking about a young girl who ran away from her home. Seems like he's looking for someone." Nia's heart stopped. She froze, her hands trembling as she tried to focus on the conversation. Kesai noticed the change in Nia's demeanor and frowned. "What is it, Nia?" Nia shook her head, her mind racing. Could it be that someone from her past was looking for her? Was it her parents, desperate to find out where she had gone? Or worse, was it Kofi? The fear that Nia had managed to push away for so long suddenly came rushing back. If Kofi had come to Zeana looking for her, he might try to take her from her. The thought made her stomach twist with anxiety. She couldn't lose her son. Not after everything they had been through. Nia, are you alright? Kesai asked, placing a hand on Nia's arm. Nia forced herself to breathe, nodding slowly. I'm fine, she said, though her voice was shaky. I thought I heard something familiar. Kesai didn't press her further, but Nia's mind continued to swirl with fear and uncertainty. She had built a new life for herself in this village, but now, it seemed that the past was catching up with her. That evening, as Nia sat in the quiet of her hut, holding Kai in her arms, the weight of her fears pressed down on her. She couldn't let anything happen to her son. He was her world, her reason for fighting. But what could she do if Kofi was truly looking for her? How could she protect Kai? Nia held her son close, whispering a promise to him. I won't let anyone take you from me, Kai, she said, her voice filled with determination. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. For several days, Nia couldn't shake the feeling that someone was looking for her. The whispers she had overheard in the forest about a trader searching for a runaway girl gnawed at her mind. The peaceful life she had built in the village now felt fragile, as if it could be shattered at any moment. One afternoon, as Nia helped Eo prepare food for the evening meal, a strange feeling of unease washed over her. She looked up from the pot she was stirring, her heart racing for reasons she couldn't explain. Something was wrong. Moments later, Kesai rushed into the hut, her face pale and her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Nia, you need to come quickly, she said, grabbing Nia's arm. There's a man asking about you. He's at the village entrance, and he says he knows you. Nia's heart plummeted. She knew, without a doubt, that it was Kofi. The boy who had abandoned her, the father of her child, had come to find her after all this time. Fear surged through her, but she knew she couldn't avoid this confrontation any longer. With Kai cradled in her arms, Nia followed Kesai out of the hut, her steps heavy with dread. As they approached the village entrance, Nia spotted a figure she hadn't seen in months but would recognize anywhere. Kofi stood tall, his arms crossed and his expression one of impatience. He had changed since she last saw him beneath the baobab tree, his shoulders broader, his face hardened by time and the weight of his travels. But his eyes were still the same, and they locked onto Nia the moment he saw her. Nia, Kofi said, his voice low and commanding. We need to talk. Nia's breath caught in her throat. She had imagined this moment many times, but now that it was happening, she didn't know what to say. All the anger, fear, and pain she had pushed down came rushing back, but she held her ground, clutching Kai tightly against her chest. What are you doing here, Kofi? Nia asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Why now? Kofi's eyes flickered to the baby in her arms, and a shadow of realization passed over his face. He hadn't come for her, he had come for the child. I heard rumors, Kofi said, his voice clipped. Rumors about a girl who ran away to the city and had a child. I didn't believe it at first, but when I heard about you being here, I had to see for myself. Nia felt her blood run cold. She had feared this moment, knowing that Kofi's interest in her child was more about avoiding responsibility than caring for Kai. You left me, Nia said, her voice rising with a mix of anger and hurt. You abandoned me when I needed you most. And now you think you can just show up and claim this child. Kofi's face hardened. I didn't abandon you. I wasn't ready for this, he said, his words sharp. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm Kai's father. Nia's grip tightened around Kai, her protective instincts flaring. You're not his father, she said fiercely. You gave up that right when you walked away. I've raised him, cared for him. You have no place in his life. Kofi took a step forward, his eyes darkening with frustration. You can't keep him from me, Nia. He's my son. I have a right to know him. The villagers who had gathered around them murmured in confusion, unsure of how to react to the sudden confrontation. Kesai stepped forward, placing a hand on Nia's shoulder. Nia is part of this village, Kesai said, her voice firm. We stand by her and her child. Kofi glanced at the villagers, his jaw clenched. It was clear that he hadn't expected this level of resistance. I'm not here to cause trouble, Kofi said, trying to keep his tone calm. I just want to talk. But Nia shook her head, her heart pounding. She couldn't let Kofi back into her life. Not now, not after everything she had been through. There's nothing left to talk about, she said firmly. Kai is my son, and you don't get to be part of his life just because it suits you now. Kofi stared at Nia, the tension between them thick and suffocating. For a long moment, he didn't say anything, his eyes flicking between Nia and the villagers who stood behind her. Finally, with a frustrated sigh, he stepped back. Fine, Kofi said, his voice laced with bitterness. But don't think this is over, Nia. I'll be back. With that, Kofi turned and walked away, disappearing down the path that led out of the village. Nia watched him go, her heart pounding in her chest. Relief washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by the weight of what had just happened. As the villagers dispersed, Kesai stayed by Nia's side, her hand still on her shoulder. Are you all right? Kesai asked softly. Nia nodded, but inside, she was anything but all right. Kofi had found her, and now that he knew about Kai, she couldn't shake the feeling that he would return. The confrontation had been avoided for now, but Nia knew that this wasn't the end. The days following Kofi's visit were tense. Though he had left the village, the fear of his return lingered in Nia's mind like a dark cloud. She couldn't help but wonder what his next move would be. Would he come back, this time more determined to take Kai from her? The thought of losing her son filled Nia with a dread so deep, it threatened to consume her. But Nia wasn't alone. The village had rallied around her after the confrontation, offering their support and protection. Kesai, Eo, and many of the other villagers made it clear that they would stand by her no matter what. It was a comfort to know that she had a community behind her, but Nia couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to be prepared for whatever might come next. One evening, as Nia sat outside her hut with Eo, she voiced her concerns. What if Kofi comes back? Nia asked, her voice quiet but filled with worry. What if he tries to take Kai away from me? Eo, who had been tending to a small fire, looked up with a calm expression. He may return, Nia, she said softly. But he will not succeed in taking your son. This village is your family now, and we will not let him take what is yours. Nia appreciated Eo's words, but the fear still gnawed at her. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. I'm scared that I won't be able to protect him. Eo stood and walked over to Nia, placing a hand on her shoulder. You are strong, Nia. Stronger than you know. You've survived so much already. And when the time comes, if Kofi returns, you won't be facing him alone. Nia nodded, though the fear still lingered. She looked down at Kai, who was fast asleep in her arms, his tiny hand curled around her finger. He was her world, her reason for fighting. She had come too far to lose him now. The next morning, Nia was surprised to see several of the villagers gathered outside her hut. Kesai was there, along with a few of the village elders. Nia stepped outside, confused by the gathering. What's going on? She asked. Kesai smiled warmly. We've come to make sure you know that the village stands with you, Nia. We've all heard about Kofi, and we want you to know that if he comes back, we'll be here to protect you and Kai. One of the elders, an older man named Jabari, nodded in agreement. This village has always protected its own. We won't let anyone take your child from you, Nia. Nia's heart swelled with gratitude. She had never expected such an outpouring of support, but it made her feel stronger, knowing that the entire village was behind her. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know what I'd do without all of you. Kesai stepped forward and placed a hand on Nia's arm. You're part of this village now, Nia. And Kai is one of us, too. We protect our own. As the villagers dispersed, Nia stood by the door of her heart filled with a renewed sense of strength. She had faced Kofi once, and if he returned, she would face him again, but this time, she wouldn't be alone. That evening, as Nia sat by the fire with Kesai and Ao, she felt a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. The fear was still there, lurking in the background, but it was no longer overwhelming. She had her village, her family, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Kai stirred in her arms, his tiny eyes blinking open as he looked up at her. Nia smiled down at her son, feeling the warmth of his presence. She knew, deep in her heart, that no matter what happened, she would fight for him with everything she had. With the village's support behind her, Nia felt more determined than ever to protect Ka and build a future for both of them. She knew that Kofi's return was a possibility, but she refused to live in fear. Instead, she focused on making sure that she and Kai were prepared for whatever challenges might come their way. One of the things that had been weighing on Nia's mind was her ability to provide for Kai. Though the village had helped her so far, Nia didn't want to rely on their kindness forever. She wanted to contribute, to earn her place in the village and ensure that she could support her son on her own. One afternoon, as she sat with Ao by the fire, Nia brought up her concerns. I want to do more to help the village, Nia said. I don't want to depend on everyone else. I need to find a way to support Kai and myself. Ao smiled, her eyes full of understanding. You are already helping the village, Nia. But I understand your desire to do more. Have you thought about learning a new skill? Something that could benefit the community and provide for your future? Nia nodded. I've been thinking about learning how to make herbal remedies, she said. I've always been interested in healing, and I know the village values the knowledge of herbs. Ao's smile widened. That's a wonderful idea, Nia. The village is always in need of healers, and the knowledge of herbs is something that will serve you and your son well. I can teach you what I know. Nia felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of learning something new. It would give her a sense of purpose and control over her future, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Thank you, Ao, Nia said, her voice filled with gratitude. I'd love to learn. In the weeks that followed, Nia began her training with Ao, learning how to identify and harvest different herbs, how to prepare them for medicinal use.